Welcome back to Celestial Scrolls, where ancient Chinese myths and legends come alive through storytelling. Today, we continue our epic journey with Chapter 31 of Journey to the West, the Plateau of Stories Yet to be Told. In our previous episode, Tang Sanzang and his disciples successfully crossed the ocean of collective memory, navigating through treacherous currents of forgotten experiences, resisting the allure of perfect memories, and emerging from the mist of forgetting stronger and more unified than before. Now they stand at the edge of a mysterious red plateau, dotted with enormous stone scrolls, blank and waiting to be written upon. This chapter explores the weight of potential, the responsibility of choice, and how our present actions create the stories that future generations will remember. You'll witness our heroes face trials that test not their past wisdom, but their ability to forge new paths worthy of legend. If you've been following our westward journey with the monk and his extraordinary disciples, you won't want to miss this adventure into uncharted narrative territory. Hit subscribe and the notification bell to continue this legendary quest. Now let's step onto the Plateau of Stories Yet to be Told. The red earth of the plateau crunched beneath their feet with a sound like dried parchment, each footstep leaving behind characters that shimmered briefly before fading into the dust. Tang Sanzang paused to examine these ephemeral markings, his scholarly mind intrigued by their fleeting nature. "The ground itself responds to our passage," he observed, pointing to where Wukong's nimble steps had briefly spelled out characters meaning swift journey before dissolving back into ordinary soil. "Most curious, master," Wukong replied, deliberately hopping in a small circle to test the phenomenon. The characters that appeared this time read playful investigation, causing the monkey to grin with delight. Bajie, never one to be left out of an interesting discovery, began shuffling his feet in elaborate patterns. His heavier tread produced characters reading comfortable meandering, which made Sha Wu Jing chuckle, a rare sound from the usually serious river monster. "It seems our intentions manifest here," Tang Sanzang noted thoughtfully. "The plateau reads not just our actions, but the spirit behind them." Before them, the landscape stretched in undulating waves of red earth, broken by the massive stone formations they had observed from the shore. Up close, these structures were even more remarkable. Each resembled a partially unrolled scroll the size of a small mountain, their surfaces smooth as polished jade, but blank as fresh parchment. The nearest scroll mountain stood perhaps half a li ahead, its curved surface gleaming in the strange, sourceless light that illuminated this realm. As they approached, Tang Sanzang's staff began to hum with gentle resonance, the 108 characters along its length pulsing in slow rhythm. "The staff recognizes something here," Tang Sanzang murmured, studying the increasingly active illuminations on his weapon. "Perhaps these blank scrolls are not as empty as they appear." When they reached the base of the first stone scroll, they discovered it was not entirely featureless. Carved into its base was a simple inscription: "First story, the choice between paths." "A trial, then," Wukong concluded, cracking his knuckles in anticipation. "I wonder what sort of challenge awaits us here." As if summoned by his words, the surface of the scroll began to shimmer and shift. Instead of remaining blank, it began to display moving images like reflections on water, but somehow more substantial. The images showed a crossroads remarkably similar to one they had encountered months earlier in their journey, but subtly different in ways that seemed significant. In this vision, the crossroads appeared in a lush valley surrounded by flowering trees. Three paths diverged from the central point, one leading up a mountain toward what appeared to be a magnificent temple, another winding through a prosperous village where people could be seen going about their daily business, and a third descending into a dark forest where mysterious lights flickered between the trees. But there was something unusual about this crossroads. It was populated not by strangers, but by four figures who looked remarkably like Tang Sanzang and his disciples, though somehow different. The vision Tang Sanzang appeared younger, more uncertain. The vision Wukong seemed wilder, less disciplined. The vision Baji looked hungrier, more desperate. The vision Sha Wujing appeared even more withdrawn, nearly invisible in his hesitation. "We're watching ourselves," Sha Wujing observed quietly, "but not as we are, as we might have been." A voice emerged from the scroll itself, speaking in harmonious tones that seemed to come from multiple sources. "Behold, a crossroads of possibility. Each path leads to a different version of your story. Choose wisely, for your selection will be written permanently upon this scroll, becoming part of the possible futures others may encounter." The vision Tang Sanzang stood at the center of the crossroads, staff in hand but clearly uncertain. Around him, his three disciples waited for guidance, each drawn to a different path. The vision Wukong was obviously attracted to the dark forest path, where the mysterious lights promised adventure and the unknown. The vision Baji gazed longingly at the village path, where the smoke of cooking fires and sounds of celebration suggested comfort and plenty. The vision Sha Wujing looked toward the mountain temple, drawn perhaps by the promise of structured spiritual purpose. But which path should the vision Tang Sanzang choose? The real Tang Sanzang wondered aloud. And why must we decide for these alternate versions of ourselves? Another voice joined the chorus from the scroll. Because choice creates story, and story shapes reality. The path you choose for them becomes a possible path for others who face similar crossroads. Choose not just for these shadows of yourselves, but for all who may walk in their footsteps. The gravity of the decision settled upon them. This was not merely an abstract exercise, but a responsibility that would ripple forward through time, influencing countless future decisions by beings they would never meet. "Let us consider each path carefully," Tang Sanzang suggested, approaching the scroll more closely to study the details of each route. The mountain temple path seemed to offer immediate spiritual fulfillment. They could see the vision disciples studying sacred texts, participating in disciplined meditation, receiving instruction from wise masters. It was a direct route to enlightenment, bypassing many of the struggles and uncertainties of their actual journey. The village path showed a different kind of fulfillment. The vision disciples integrated into community life, using their abilities to help ordinary people with everyday problems. The vision Wukong used his strength to help with construction and protection. The vision Baji became a beloved chef and entertainer. The vision Sha Wujing served as a steady, reliable guardian for the village children. The forest path revealed the most mysterious possibilities. the vision disciples following the strange lights deeper into unknown territories, encountering wonders and dangers that existed nowhere else. Their journey had no clear destination, but each step revealed new mysteries and unprecedented challenges. Each path has merit, Tang Sanzang admitted. The mountain offers wisdom through discipline. The village offers wisdom through service. The forest offers wisdom through exploration. But which creates the best story? Wukong asked, getting to the heart of their dilemma. Which choice helps future travelers most? Baji, studying the village path with obvious longing, spoke up thoughtfully. The village path looks most appealing to me, but perhaps that's exactly why it might not be the right choice. Easy answers rarely create stories worth remembering. Sha Wujing nodded slowly. The mountain path offers certainty, but growth often requires uncertainty, and yet the forest path might lead nowhere at all. Tang Sanzang stood in contemplation for a long moment, watching the three vision paths play out their possibilities. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "I believe we're approaching this incorrectly," he announced. "We're trying to choose the best path, but perhaps the real lesson is about how choices are made, not which choice is made." He approached the scroll and spoke directly to it. "Show us not the vision disciples choosing a single path, but the vision Tang Sanzang teaching his disciples to choose together, each contributing their wisdom to a decision that honors all perspectives." The scroll shimmered, and the vision began to change. Now the vision Tang Sanzang gathered his disciples in the center of the crossroads, and they began to discuss the paths openly. The vision Wukong shared his excitement about the forest's mysteries while acknowledging the wisdom of structure. The vision Bajie spoke of his desire for community while recognizing the value of challenge. The vision Sha Wujing expressed his attraction to order while admitting the importance of growth through difficulty. Together, the vision disciples reached a surprising conclusion. They would not choose a single path, but would visit each in turn, spending time at the mountain temple to build discipline, time in the village to understand service, and time in the forest to embrace mystery. Their journey would be longer and more complex, but it would integrate all forms of wisdom rather than favoring one over others. As this new vision played out on the scroll, permanent characters began to appear on its surface, writing themselves in flowing script. The story of the integrated path, how four travelers chose to embrace all wisdom rather than select one truth. The scroll's voice spoke again, now with obvious approval. "Well chosen. This story will guide others to seek synthesis rather than separation, to build bridges between different forms of wisdom rather than walls." The characters on the scroll settled into permanence, and the moving images faded, leaving behind a beautiful calligraphy that would endure for ages. The first story of their passage through the plateau was complete. "One down," Wukong observed, looking across the landscape at the dozens of other blank scrolls awaiting them, "though I suspect each will present increasingly complex challenges." They continued across the red earth, their footsteps now creating characters that read "unified purpose" and "integrated wisdom," reflecting their success with the first trial. The next scroll mountain was larger than the first. its surface more intricately curved, suggesting a more sophisticated challenge ahead. As they approached, this scroll's inscription read, Second Story, the balance between self and service. This time, the visions that appeared showed not alternate versions of themselves, but scenes from their actual journey, moments when each disciple had faced the choice between personal desire and duty to their mission. But these were not mere replays of past events. They were hypothetical extensions, showing what might have happened if different choices had been made. They watched vision scenes of Wukong abandoning the group to pursue interesting side adventures, of Bajie choosing comfort over the hardship of the road, of Sha Wujing becoming so selfless that he lost all sense of individual identity. Each scenario played out to its logical conclusion, showing both the immediate consequences and the long-term ripple effects. This scroll asks us to judge our own past choices, Tang Sanzang realized, but also to establish principles for future decisions by others facing similar dilemmas. The visions paused, waiting for their input. This time, however, the choice was not about selecting a single scenario, but about identifying the principle that should guide such decisions. After much discussion, they settled on a story about dynamic balance, not a rigid rule about always choosing duty over desire or service over self, but a flexible wisdom that could evaluate each situation individually. Their story emphasized the importance of honest self-examination, consultation with trusted companions, and consideration of long-term consequences over immediate gratification. The second scroll accepted their story, its surface filling with characters describing the principle of conscious choice, how to balance self and service through mindful evaluation. As they progressed across the plateau, each scroll presented increasingly sophisticated challenges. The third asked them to create a story about facing failure and disappointment. The fourth required a tale about dealing with conflicting loyalties. The fifth demanded a narrative about maintaining hope in seemingly hopeless circumstances. With each completed scroll, the landscape around them subtly changed. The red earth grew richer in color, small plants began to sprout along their path, and the air itself seemed to thicken with potential. They were not just writing stories, but actively creating a new layer of reality. The most challenging scroll stood at the center of the plateau, a massive formation that dwarfed all the others, its surface so smooth it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its inscription simply read, "The ultimate story, the purpose of all stories." When they approached this final scroll, no visions appeared on its surface. Instead, it remained stubbornly blank, offering no guidance about what story it expected. This one requires us to provide everything, Tang Sanzang understood, not just the choice, but the entire narrative framework. They stood before the blank surface for a long time, each lost in thought. Finally, it was Sha Wujing who spoke first. What if the ultimate story is not about achieving any particular goal, but about the value of the journey itself? He suggested quietly, not the destination, but the transformation that occurs through traveling. Wukong nodded enthusiastically. Yes, the story that teaches others that growth comes from facing challenges, not from avoiding them. Bajie added his own insight, and that pleasure and hardship are both necessary parts of experience, neither to be avoided nor indulged in excess, but balanced like ingredients in a perfect meal. Tang Sanzang smiled at his disciples' wisdom. Then let us create the story of the eternal journey, the tale that teaches all beings that the purpose of existence is not to reach a final destination, but to continue growing, learning, and serving others through whatever path life presents. Together, they began to tell this ultimate story to the blank scroll. They spoke of the monk who left his comfortable monastery not because he was dissatisfied, but because he recognized that true wisdom requires engagement with the world. They told of the monkey who learned that true freedom comes not from breaking all rules, but from choosing which ones to honor. They described the pig who discovered that true satisfaction comes not from endless consumption, but from appreciating what is already present. They recounted the tale of the river monster who found that true service comes not from mindless obedience, but from conscious commitment to worthy causes. As they spoke, the massive scroll began to glow with inner light. Characters appeared on its surface, but these were unlike any they had seen before. They seemed to move and dance, forming new combinations and meanings, even as they watched. The story of the eternal journey, how four travelers discovered that the path itself is the destination. But beneath this title, the characters continued to shift and change, suggesting infinite variations and interpretations, a story that would adapt itself to each reader's understanding and need. As the final scroll completed itself, the entire plateau began to transform. The red earth bloomed into a garden of extraordinary beauty, with flowers they had never seen before and fruit trees bearing sustenance for both body and spirit. Streams of clear water appeared, flowing in patterns that seemed to mirror the characters they had written on the scrolls. In the center of this transformed landscape stood a simple wooden gate, unadorned but somehow luminous with inner peace. Beyond it, a path continued westward, disappearing into distant mountains that shimmered with promise. The end of one phase, the beginning of another, Tang Sanzang observed, shouldering his pack and adjusting his grip on his staff. The 108 characters still glowed along its length, but now they seemed to pulse in harmony with the transformed plateau around them. "Do you think our stories will truly help others?" Baji asked, looking back at the completed scrolls that now dotted the garden landscape. "That is not for us to determine," Tang Sanzang replied gently. "We have written honestly from our experience and understanding. Whether these stories prove helpful depends upon the wisdom and needs of those who encounter them." Wukong was already at the gate, peering through at the path beyond. "Whatever awaits us next, at least we know we've added something worthwhile to the world's collection of stories." Sha Wujing took one last look at the plateau, now transformed from barren potential into abundant reality. "We came seeking the sutras of wisdom," he mused, "but perhaps we've been writing sutras of our own all along." With that observation, they passed through the simple gate, leaving behind the plateau of stories yet to be told, now the garden of stories completed, and continuing their eternal journey westward into whatever new adventures awaited them beyond the shimmering mountains. Behind them, the garden bloomed with increasing abundance, its stories now available to inspire and guide future travelers who would face their own crossroads, their own choices between paths, their own opportunities to write meaningful narratives upon the ever-unfolding scroll of existence. And that concludes Chapter 31. Tang Sanzang and his disciples have successfully navigated the Plateau of Stories Yet to be told, transforming it into a garden of stories completed through their wisdom and choices. What mysteries await them in the shimmering mountains beyond? If you enjoyed watching our heroes create stories that will guide future generations, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Which of the scroll's challenges would you find most difficult? Choosing between different paths, balancing self and service, or creating the ultimate story about the purpose of all stories? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss Chapter 32, where our travelers will discover what lies beyond the simple wooden gate in the mysterious mountains ahead. Here at Celestial Scrolls, we're committed to bringing these timeless tales of wisdom and adventure to life, one chapter at a time. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the landscape of potential and purpose. I'll see you next time as we continue westward with Tang Sanzang and his extraordinary disciples.